If you had told me on my wedding day that the thing that almost broke my marriage would cost $3 at a pharmacy and could fit in the palm of my hand, I would have laughed out loud. I'm not laughing now. Well, mostly not. It all began with me standing in my own kitchen at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, holding a small bottle of men's lubricant that very clearly, absolutely, and without any doubt did not belong to me, while my wife slept peacefully upstairs, completely unaware of the small disaster she had unknowingly left in her handbag. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Get your snacks, get comfortable, and just remember this. The people in these stories always had chances to behave like normal human beings. They simply chose not to. Leave a comment and subscribe, because you're going to enjoy this one. I had been searching for my spare car keys. That was it. That was the entire beginning. No suspicion, no jealousy, no dramatic feeling that something was wrong. Just lost keys because my main set had slipped between the couch cushions, and I had an early meeting with a parent at Eastfield High that I was already not looking forward to. I reached into Kimberly's brown leather handbag sitting on the kitchen counter, the same bag she always left there without thinking. Inside, my hand touched lip balm, her work ID card, a pack of mint candies, the keys I needed, and a smooth matte black bottle with simple writing on it that somehow felt very serious and very out of place. The words on it had that strange tone only design can give, clearly not something meant for a woman's routine items. I just stood there for a moment, 10 seconds, maybe 15. The fridge kept humming softly. The wall clock ticked like nothing important was happening at all. I turned the bottle slowly in my hand like some kind of detective studying a clue, even though I had no training, no experience, and no real idea what I was doing. Just a man trying to make sense of something that didn't fit. A calm voice in my head said, "Don't overreact, Nolan." Another voice replied, "Give me one normal explanation for this." That second voice had been quietly collecting small doubts for 2 years like a careful accountant writing everything down. I couldn't find a single good explanation. So I put the bottle back exactly where I found it, walked to the garage, grabbed a tube of superglue from a shelf behind some paint cans, returned to the kitchen, and made a small, stupid adjustment to the bottle with the careful hands of someone who had watched too many crime movies and thought he understood consequences. Did I think it through properly? Not really. I gave it maybe 4 seconds of thought. My final conclusion in that moment was simple. Whoever is involved in this will have a very uncomfortable night, and I will learn the truth without saying a word. It felt clever at the time, satisfying even. In reality, it was one of the dumbest decisions I had ever made in my life. After that, I made some pasta, went to bed, and slept very well. The kind of sleep where your brain believes everything is fine and nothing bad is coming. That specific kind of sleep usually only happens right before life proves you completely wrong. Before I continue, you need to understand Kimberly. Because without her, none of this story makes sense. Kimberly McCain was the kind of person who made you feel like you were living your life at half effort. Not in a cruel way, but in a way that made you want to do better, to try harder, to be sharper. She didn't even have to say it. It was just her presence. She was intelligent, calm, and focused. Funny too, in a quiet way, where she would say something perfectly accurate, then move on before you even finished laughing. You would still be reacting, and she had already shifted to something else entirely. We met at a professional development conference I didn't even want to attend. The coffee was terrible, like it had been made days earlier and just reheated forever. She made a comment about the keynote speaker that was so sharp and correct that I laughed a little too loudly. She looked at me like she had been waiting for someone in the room to actually understand. That was 11 years ago. I had been falling for her ever since. She worked at the Harwick District Courthouse as a legal compliance officer. Long hours, complicated cases, sensitive files she could never talk about. A work phone she always kept separate from her personal one. I respected that completely. I was just a history teacher. I spent my days explaining things like the Missouri Compromise to teenagers who were mentally anywhere but in my classroom. Her work sounded serious and important. I never questioned it. Now I understand she was counting on that. But there were small things, if I'm honest. Her laptop angled away when I walked by. Phone calls she took in the garage late at night. Her voice lowered so much I could barely hear it. The way she sometimes looked at me across the dinner table with an expression I couldn't fully understand. Something between love, stress, and something heavier I didn't have words for yet. I told myself it was just work pressure. I trusted her completely. So I chose not to look too closely. For 2 years, I chose not to see what was right in front of me. That bottle ended that habit. The first day after I swapped it, nothing happened. Kimberly came home at 7, kissed me on the cheek, made tea, asked about my day, ate dinner, and sat on the couch watching TV with her feet tucked under her like always. Everything normal. So normal it almost felt insulting. The second day was the same. Nothing unusual. No reaction. No change. I started thinking maybe I had completely lost my mind. Maybe I had created a problem where none existed and ruined a perfectly good tube of superglue for no reason at all. Day 2, however, was the last normal day of my life. I just didn't know it yet. Ralph Lewis caught me in the hallway outside room 114 that morning, just a few minutes before the first bell. Ralph taught biology 2 doors down. He had the energy of someone who had already had too much coffee and was still looking for more excitement. He also had the social awareness of a very friendly dog, meaning he had none at all, but in a completely harmless way. He stopped right in front of me, pointed directly at my face, and said, "I looked wrong." I said, "Good morning." He shook his head. "No, seriously. Something's off with you." "I'm fine," I told him. "You've got that look," he said. "Like you know something, but you don't know if it's good or bad yet." Then he tilted his head and added, "Kimberly okay?" "Yes, Kimberly is fine," I said quickly. He stared at me a second longer, then walked away while still pointing at me like I was evidence in a case he didn't fully understand. I should have paid attention to him. Looking back, Ralph was one of the only people around me who was exactly what he appeared to be. That alone should have meant something. On day 3, during third period at 11:45, I was teaching a lesson on the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It's actually a very interesting moment in history when told properly, and I was telling it properly. My students were actually paying attention for once, which should have been my first warning that something was about to go wrong. Then the intercom interrupted. "Mr. McCain, please come to the main office. There are people here to see you." 26 students immediately looked at me like they were watching the start of a disaster movie. I calmly told them to read pages 140 to 155 and that there might be a quiz. There would not be a quiz, but it gave me a few seconds of silence to breathe. I walked down the hallway feeling something I couldn't name yet. When I entered Principal Donna Hartwell's office, I saw 2 men in suits that immediately felt like government work. Not just suits for style, but suits for authority. The kind of men who stand still in a way that isn't relaxed at all, but trained. Principal Hartwell was standing near her plant, looking like she was seriously reconsidering every career decision she had ever made. One of the men stepped forward and showed me a badge. FBI Special Agent Roland Briggs, Counterintelligence Division. He had the kind of face that suggested he had been delivering life-changing bad news for so long that he no longer reacted to it at all. Like nothing surprised him anymore, because he had already seen worse than whatever was coming next. "Mr. McCain," he said in a calm voice, "please sit down. I will stand." Then he repeated it again, the same words, the same steady tone, not sounding like a request, but like a fixed instruction. "Please sit down." I sat down. Slowly. "Are you familiar?" Briggs asked while opening a folder. Inside were federal evidence protocols about handling monitored personal items during an active counterintelligence operation. The sound of the folder opening felt louder than it should have. I looked at him and said, I teach high school history. Yes, we are aware of what you teach, Mr. McCain, he replied without looking up. Are you familiar with the protocol? No. He began explaining it, slowly, clearly. No emotion in his voice, no drama at all. Somehow that made it worse, much worse. A counterfeiting group. 18 months of federal surveillance work. Defense intelligence moving across state lines hidden inside ordinary commercial lubricant bottles, microfilm, a tracking device, a microdot capsule, a planned handoff at Saudi Cross, a courier picking up the bottle, noticing something wrong, a tamper mark disappearing within an hour, the main target going completely dark. 2 years of careful work gone in a moment. He closed the folder. You did that? He asked. The room turned very quiet. It felt like even the air stopped moving for a second. Donna Hartwell was staring at a spot on the wall about 6 inches above my head with extreme focus, like that point on the wall had all the answers in the world. I want to ask about my wife, I said. Briggs and his associate exchanged a look. It was not a small look. It was a full conversation without words, like they had spoken an entire paragraph inside a single second. Mr. McCain, don't, he started. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Don't say my name like that. Don't pause like that. Just tell me. Briggs exhaled slightly. Your wife, he said carefully, has been an employee of the Federal Bureau of Investigation for 9 years. In the corner of the room, a fern had one brown leaf hanging low at the bottom. I found myself staring at it for no reason, like it was the only real thing in the room. She is not a compliance officer, I said. No, he answered. She never was. 9 years. We'd been married for 6. Is she safe? I asked. Briggs looked at me for a moment longer than before. Something changed in his face, but it was not kindness exactly. It was recognition. Like he understood I was not going to break easily. For now, he said. She has been pulled from field work. She is at the Harwick Federal Building. I nodded once. Donna Hartwell was still staring at the wall, like she was trying not to look at me at all. Cancel my afternoon classes, I said. I did not know it yet, but that sentence was the beginning of everything breaking apart. It was the first step into a chain of truths that would destroy every simple idea I had about my own life. The second truth was waiting at the federal building. The third was inside a file that an analyst named Priya Anand had not fully processed yet. And the fourth truth, the one that would eventually leave me standing in a rain-soaked parking garage in Clarksville looking at a dead body, was still 3 weeks away. They took me to the Harwick Federal Building in an unmarked car. The inside smelled like old coffee and tired air conditioning. I sat in the back seat and watched the town pass by through the window. A small diner on Clemens Street where Kimberly and I used to eat breakfast every Sunday. The park where we walked when the weather was good. The courthouse where she had never actually worked, even though I believed she did. My mind tried to do what it always did when things went wrong. It searched for a historical comparison, some example, some parallel from the past. But I could not find one. Nothing matched this. History, for all its patterns, does not prepare you for discovering your wife of 6 years has been living a second life with calm precision, like it was the most normal thing in the world. The federal building felt like a place where very important things happened inside very ordinary-looking rooms. Nothing about it looked special, which somehow made it worse. Briggs walked me through a hallway with pale lights and quiet floors. The air smelled like recycled ventilation. He stopped outside a door with a small reinforced window. Inside, Kimberly was sitting at a table. Same gray blazer she had worn that morning, hands resting flat on the surface. Not cuffed, not restrained, but still different. She was not performing anymore. That was the first thing I noticed. All the small normal habits she used every day were gone. It was like someone had taken off a mask she had worn so long it had become part of her face. She looked up and saw me. I do not know how to explain the expression on her face. I have spent years trying to describe human emotion in words, and I still cannot fully name it. It was not guilt, not relief, not fear. It looked like someone finally putting something heavy down after carrying it for far too long. Like relief mixed with exhaustion so deep it had become part of her bones. Briggs opened the door. I walked in and sat across from her. The door closed behind me. Silence. Then she spoke. "I am sorry." "How long?" I asked. "Since before we met." I paused. My mind struggled to catch up. "Were we—" I stopped, then tried again. "Was any of it real?" "All of it," she said quickly, firmly, like she had said it many times in her head before. "Nolan, all of it was real. Everything between us was real. You need to hear that first. You lied to me every single day for 6 years. About work," she said. "Not about us." I let out a short laugh, but it did not sound right. It came out sharp. "That is a distinction you are going to have to explain very slowly," I said, "because from where I stand, those two things are not separate." "I know," she said, and her voice broke slightly on the words. Then she forced it steady again. "I know what I took from you. I am not going to pretend it was okay. It was not. But I chose you every day. Through everything. And sometimes choosing you cost me more than you will ever know." That sentence stayed in my mind without me understanding why. It would matter later in ways I could not see yet. "Tell me about the bottle," I said. So she did. She explained the syndicate, the surveillance operation, the long-running case built over months and years, the bottle used as a hidden container, the tracking systems inside it, the controlled handoff that was supposed to expose a hidden handler. It was meant to be a perfect moment. One appearance, one identification, a single break in a long, invisible chain. But then I had shown up at the wrong time with a tube of superglue. The courier noticed quickly. Kimberly said the name softly, "Sadie Cross, experienced and careful." She felt the weight difference, checked the seal, and disappeared. Within an hour, everything went dark. "Roland is furious," she added. "Sounds reasonable," I said. "Nolan," she said again, watching me carefully. "There is something I never told you. It was not just protocol. I was protecting you." "Protecting me from what?" A pause followed. One of those careful pauses where words were selected and then locked away again. "That is classified," she said. It was the second time she had said something like that. The second locked door. I was not an agent. I was a history teacher. But I knew how to read silences. And the silence in this room was full of meaning. Briggs returned about 20 minutes later with another woman, Priya Anand. She looked precise, controlled, like someone who had memorized every file she had ever seen. She explained the situation clearly. The syndicate now knew Kimberly's cover was at risk. They were watching anyone connected to her. That included me. Witness protection was an option. Disappearing completely was another. Or I could help them. "You are not in any database they can easily use," Briggs said. "You are invisible to them." A history teacher in Harwick, Tennessee. Not important. Not noticed. "That is the most backhanded compliment I have ever heard," I said. "It is not a compliment," Briggs replied. "It is an assessment." I looked at Kimberly. She was staring down at the table again, trying to keep her expression controlled. "Is this a good idea?" I asked her. A long silence followed. "No," she said finally. "It is a terrible idea." Another pause. "But I think you should do it." That was the most honest thing she had said to me in 6 years, and somehow it was enough. I turned back to Briggs. "Tell me what I need to do." I did not know it yet, but somewhere across the city, Priya Anand had already opened another file about me. Just a routine check. Nothing unusual. What she found on that thread was not normal routine work. She had not told Briggs about it yet. She was still looking at her screen, sitting very still, trying to decide the right way to explain it. They sent me to the Hollow 3 days later. It was a safe house in rural Arkansas that, from outside, looked exactly like what it was meant to look like. A plain, forgettable farmhouse about 40 minutes away from nowhere, with a gravel path and a porch light that kept flickering on and off like it could not make up its mind. Inside, it was much less forgettable. Inside, it was 3 weeks of intense crash training in tradecraft, given by 2 instructors who mostly communicated through their sighs and the occasional look of quiet professional disappointment. I learned how to watch people without being seen. I learned how to approach and make contact without leaving any trace behind. I learned how to listen to a normal conversation and pick out what was hidden underneath the words, which turned out to be not so different from teaching teenagers who did not want to sit in a classroom. You start noticing what the body is saying while the mouth is just performing. Ralph Lewis texted me 3 times during those 3 weeks. The first message said, "Told you." The second one said, "Donna told me about the FBI guys. Are you okay?" The third one said, "If you're in witness protection, you could have just said so, man." I did not reply to any of them. Professionally speaking, that was the correct thing to do. Personally speaking, it was one of the hardest things I did in Arkansas. Kimberly and I spoke only twice. The calls were short and monitored. She sounded like herself both times, warm, careful, and funny in that way that could still hurt you if you were not ready for it. But something underneath her voice felt different. Or maybe it was not new at all. Maybe I was only hearing it now because I finally knew what I was listening for. On the second call, just before she ended it, she said, "Nolan, when this is over, I am going to tell you everything, every single thing. And then you can decide." "Decide what?" I asked. "Whether any of it changes anything," she said. I stayed with that thought for a long time that night in the dark of the Arkansas safe house. I kept thinking about whether love can survive when you discover the person you love has also been someone else you never knew. I thought about whether a wrong map changes the land itself, or just your understanding of it. I thought about whether 6 years of real mornings, real dinners, and real laughter could be turned false just because another truth existed alongside it. I did not have an answer, but I knew I was heading to Memphis to try and find one. Aldermore Antiques was on a quiet street in Memphis, standing like a building that had decided a long time ago it would outlive everything around it. It had 3 floors filled with carefully chosen European antiques, brass handles, and the smell of old wood mixed with even older money. Karsten Mole had owned it for 11 years. It looked fully legitimate from every angle. He was careful about that kind of thing. The best cover is one that does not feel like a cover at all, because most of it is actually real. I walked in on a Thursday afternoon wearing a jacket that was not mine and carrying a backstory I had memorized the way I used to memorize lesson plans. Careful, detailed, and with a quiet fear that if I slipped even once, it would all fall apart. Maul was behind the counter, looking at a small bronze figure with a loop. He matched the description exactly. Mid-40s, well-dressed, with a kind of controlled good looks that usually came with money and patience. He looked up at me with the calm of someone who had already studied me and placed me somewhere in his mind before I had even taken 2 steps inside. "Looking for something specific?" he asked. His German South African accent was soft but clear. "A friend suggested I come here," I said. "They said you sometimes deal in pre-war German cartography, old maps, survey papers, that kind of material." There was a pause. Very short, but still there. Most people would not have noticed it. I did. "We do handle that sometimes," he said. "What time period are you interested in?" "Early 20th century, I replied. "Mainly documentation around territorial shifts after 1918. I held his eyes. Not too hard, not too soft. Just enough. Another pause followed. This one was timed more carefully. "Come back on Saturday," he said. "I might have something then." I nodded, glanced at the bronze piece and made a small comment about its craftsmanship, then left. Outside, I walked 2 blocks, turned a corner, and leaned against a brick wall. I stayed there for about 30 seconds, just breathing like someone who had narrowly stepped out of danger. Contact had been made. The chain was moving again. And somewhere far above, in an FBI operations room in Nashville, Roland Briggs was watching a small moving dot on a screen. For the first time in 3 weeks, something inside him loosened slightly. What nobody in that room knew, and what Priya Anand had been trying to find the right moment to say for days, was what she had discovered in a secondary background thread. She told Briggs the night I came back from Memphis. I had just been debriefed and sent back to the safe house. I was eating a sandwich when my handler knocked and told me Briggs wanted me at the Nashville field office immediately. Now Priya Anand was waiting in the briefing room. She looked like someone carrying something too heavy for one person, finally ready to put it down. "Mr. McCain," she said, "I need to ask you about your father." "My father died in a car crash," I said, "when I was 12. "Yes," she replied carefully. "That is what the record shows." The room became very quiet. "Before you became a teacher," she continued, placing a file on the table between us, "you worked as a government archivist right after college for 14 months. "That is correct. In that time, you handled and cataloged a classified group of defense documents. Those documents disappeared about 6 weeks after you left the job." She paused again. "The Syndicate Glues network has believed for 11 years that either you took those documents or you know where they are. That belief is why this operation exists." Another pause. "Kimberly was originally assigned to get close to you and find out which one it was," she said. I sat very still. 6 years. She had been assigned to me 6 years ago. She had come to that conference, drunk bad coffee, made that carefully timed joke about the keynote speaker. All of it, from the very beginning, had been work. A mission. "She fell in love with you," Priya said quietly, like she was reading the thought on my face. "She never submitted her original report. She never turned in her findings. She has been protecting you from both sides for 6 years. She looked at me. "That is why she would not tell you who Glue is. She knew if you knew, it would break something she could not repair." "Who is he?" I asked. Priya opened the file and turned it toward me. I stared at the photo for a long time. My father was 67. His hair was more gray than I remembered, but I also realized I did not remember much clearly at all. I had been 12 when he supposedly died. He looked calm in the picture. Not relaxed, but steady. The kind of calm that does not come from peace, but from knowing you are the most dangerous person in any room you enter. "Edgar Finch," Priya said, "known to his network as Glue." She paused. "Your father." I did not speak for a long time. "The documents," I finally said. "Where are they?" "We believe he stored them in a unit registered under your childhood address in Harwick. He placed them there before he disappeared. As protection. Against the government, against his own people, against anyone coming for him." She closed the file. "He has been using your name as cover for 26 years. The syndicate thinks you are involved. The FBI has even questioned it. The only person who has always insisted you are innocent is your wife.